We talk about the 90s and we remember cassette tapes and Shaktiman, but it was also a time that was extremely analog.
और ये बिल्कुल इसमें समझने की बात है कि उस समय नो डैशबोर्ड्स नहीं हुआ करते थे, पावर पॉइंट प्रेजेंटेशंस नहीं हुआ करते थे, नो रियल टाइम डेटा.
But one thing that has been constant from then to now is the courage to ask questions about the future.
और पता है 90s में एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग चीज़ प्रथम ने की थी, वो शायद कम लोगों को पता होगी. उस समय एक ईमेल कैंपेन किया गया था एंड उसमें चिल्ड्रन राइट, बच्चों के शिक्षा के अधिकार के लिए एक ईमेल कैंपेन किया गया था.
And they received over 4,000 emails in response. Mind you, this was a time when email itself wasn't common. Forget email marketing.
4,000 लोगों ने रिप्लाई किया. इसका मतलब आगे की सोच सिर्फ हम ही नहीं रख रहे थे, बाकी और भी कई लोग इस तरीके से सोच रहे थे.
Even before the CSR Act of 2013 existed, we had organizations like ITC and PNG who had social investments in mind, thinking about the future.
नीति बनने में समय लगता है, उतना लगा, लेकिन कुछ सरकारी अधिकारियों ने ये जो ज़रूरी बात है उसको नज़रअंदाज नहीं किया. उन मुद्दों पर सभी ने बहुत मेहनत की.
Which is why it's now very important that we hear from these people and see what they think is coming up in the next 30 years.
Let's welcome our panelists. Please join us in welcoming all the panelists that are here today. Ashwini Bhide, Additional Chief Secretary, could not come. She is Additional Chief Secretary to Chief Minister of Maharashtra, and she is a well-known person for her contribution to the Mumbai Metro Rail Corporation. But suddenly she has got something, so she is in Mantralaya.
But we have here with us Mr. Prabhakar Lingareddy, Executive Vice President and Head Social Investments. He served in multiple leadership roles across his long-standing career in ITC. Please join us on stage.
Please join us on stage. Next we have Mr. Aditya Natraj, CEO of Piramal Foundation, but he's an ex-Pratham colleague and friend of Pratham, along with being ex-KPMG and Ashoka Fellow.
I would also like to invite Ms. Enakshee Deva, Head Corporate Communications and Corporate Social Responsibility. She also held multiple leadership positions across fabric and home care communications within the organization. Please join us.
Now we have Ms. Nusrat Pathan, Head of Corporate Social Responsibility. Under her leadership, Parivartan, the bank's CSR, has reached over 100 million lives.
And finally, the moderator for this session, Mr. Varun Limaye, co-founder, Mesa School of Business. He's also an ex-colleague and friend of Pratham and is passionate about bridging the skill gap in India's startup ecosystem.
Over to you, Varun.
Round of applause to the panelists, guys. We've got amazing people on stage. They've got a total experience of almost 80 years together working in the development space. So we are going to be picking their brains today. Just trying to understand what the space looks like. I'm very nervous right now, and I'm going to admit that because I know a lot of you in the audience. Those of you who know me, just give me a cheer because I need it. I'm a Pratham alumni, and I'm back after 8 years, guys. So 2018 is when I quit Pratham to pursue my MBA. So it's been 8 years now. Now that I'm back, I just can remember that, Pratham is a vibe. It's a very different kind of an energy. It's very, very, very different. The first time, the way I ended up joining Pratham was that I told Madhav that I wanted to work for a non-profit, and it turned out he, ran one. He asked me one question, "Tumhe Excel aata hai kya?" And I bola, "Aata hai thoda sa." And then he said, "To fir kurla aa jao." So that's how my journey at Pratham started. I'm the intern here, guys, so I'm not going to be doing more talking than this. I was in a room with these folks, and I was trying to understand their experiences, and I think they're just fantastic things that we have to learn. So I'm going to kickstart the panel now, and I'm going to start off with a broad question, and then I'm going to try to go as deep as I can in the 30 or 40 minutes that we have. The first question that I wanted to pose for everyone here, and anybody can start, was that it's 30 years now that Pratham has been in existence. All of us have been working in the development space. We've been doing a lot of fruitful work. We've learned a lot of things. But if there was one thing that you could kind of pinpoint is probably the most drastic or the most useful thing that you've learned over the last many years that you've been in the development space, what would that one thing look like? And if you had to extrapolate that for the next 30 years, how would you like to use that one thing to define what the future for us looks like? Anybody can start.
So slightly complicated, yet provokes you to think. Two questions that you asked: what is it that you think you've learned? Let's look at it this way. What has we seen actually evolve in the last 30 years? I think the most relevant for me, being part of the CSR community, is the actual evolution of the Act in itself, right, into 2013. And I think what has grown phenomenally is the contribution of the NGO sector, the not-for-profit sector, the way we've evolved there, the strengths of that sector and how those have actually built the ecosystem. I think those two for me are huge contributors to the entire development space in the last 30 years. For me, the learning is how the needle has shifted from philanthropy to more strategic thinking. Yeah? And in the next 30 years or in the next 10 years, what I actually look forward to seeing as a change is for this to move further. Because currently we are still somewhere stuck at the outcome level. We are still thinking activities, we are still thinking very hard-coded impact criteria, but to actually start looking at outcome and start actually looking at where we are making an impact. I think that needle shift in the sector is something that is required and that I personally think is going to be the next 10 years for me.
I think building on what you shared, right, I think first of all, it's a privilege to be here in this audience and talk about reflecting back, but also talking about looking forward. And when we look at, for PNG Shiksha, it's been 20 years, and obviously Pratham has been there for much longer. But I think one big change has been the way the conversations have evolved from access to impact. And I think that's what you were also alluding to, right? When the start of this journey for PNG at least was all about, do we have enough schools in the country? Can we help build them? Can we help get children to go there? But now it's more about, yes, maybe the child is going to school, but what is the outcome of that? And can they do something with the education that they're supposed to be getting? So I think moving the needle on what happens as an outcome of the activity system. And I think the other one that has enabled that is also the partnership of all the stakeholders coming together. I think you laid it out, right? It is a complex ecosystem and problem that we are all trying to solve for. And if it was easy, maybe in 30 years, you would have been already sitting on a solution that can achieve 100% education for everyone. But I think the fact that every stakeholder has a role, whether it is the parent, the community, the government, the corporate sector, and everyone playing their role, will probably move the needle much faster for the next 10 years.
Got it. And just to kind of just add to that, and then we can go to the other panelists as well. I think both of you spoke about impact. Measuring impact is hard. Yes. It's one of those things where, things get stuck. And when there is live, displayable impact that is available, it kind of kickstarts a flywheel where there are more investments start coming in. Any good practices that you've seen in impact assessment itself that have worked for you?
I think one thing that we always try to educate our internal stakeholders as much as everyone else is, we always talk about the number of children that we've reached, and reach becomes that one impact, but it's equally about the depth of impact, right? So even if you've been able to reach, say, fewer children or fewer beneficiaries, but if that one life has been changed in a way that the impact is sustained, that you can step back and let things unfold on their own, and they would probably be better off for the engagement that you've been able to do with them. I think that is the one thing that we try and look at as well. And you're right, the long-term impact, measurable impact will take time, but if we have enough proof of concept to tell us that we're moving in the right direction, and enough stories, enough anecdotes. I think that helps keep the energy and the conviction going for the time being.
No, that's helpful.
Can I add to that? So just building on that, equally important is when you're working on scale, because for us, that's a challenge as well as an opportunity. And I think being part of the CSR team at HDFC Bank, that's something that we take pride in, because we've tried to instill that rigor of impact within our projects right from the design phase, right? So because we work on 6 thematic areas, multiple projects at any point of time, we have more than 200 projects which would be active on field, yet to make sense of all that data and then to report, not just on numbers, but on impact, I think is a tremendous amount of effort that goes in. And that's only possible because we build impact indicators at the design level. Short term, long term, medium, all of these. And that's what enables us to actually go out with confidence and talk about the impact that we've created. So I think they're building on impact, creating the indicators right at the design phase. Be it any NGO, you are very clear as to what is it that you want to come up with. And that's something that has contributed for us.
I think when I look at last 30 years, and if I were to sort of look at 2 words that resonate for me, and which sort of reflects the journey of last 30 years of the Indian development sector, one word is possibilities. The second word is optimism. I think at least our generation, I know when we were being in school, etc., there was a lot of negativity around us. What has really happened in the last 30 years is, I think there's a greater sense of optimism, more and more possibilities being explored, belief in possibilities, and I think to that extent, the foundation has been set. And one of my favorite authors, when I look at Stephen Covey, I think earlier all of us would talk of circle of concern. I think increasingly what the development sector has shown, and the whole ecosystem approach of development sector working with the government, with the corporates and philanthropy, that you can have circles of influence. And what I've noticed is the circles of influence are actually expanding in radius over the last 30 years. I think to me that's a defining moment. And we have seen in a way what we sort of experienced Pratham's journey over the last 30 years. It talks of the same. It's all about possibilities. It's all about optimism. It's creating those circles of influence. How this will play out in future? I would look at it from building on this foundation, and again I saw it, I'm going to steal that word, I was looking for that word for our own articulation, is future readiness. How do we build on this to be future ready? And when I say future ready, I believe in future readiness starting from n equal to 1. It's not future readiness starting from 30,000 feet, it's future readiness starting from n equal to 1. But whilst doing so, 2 things which will become extremely important in my view, and we'll have to see how to weave in, values. I think I personally worry about dilution in values. And that's something extremely important that we need to see how to factor and cognize. Second, whether we like it or not, technology will decide what pathways we take for future readiness. I am a HR person, so very often we discuss, and this thing is, will technology dissolve empathy? Now, empathy is at the core of the development sector. So how are we able to blend that without losing empathy is what's going to be the challenge going forward.
Yeah, and I think when you spoke about optimism, what became very clear to me was that what the Companies Act started, impact takes time to be seen, for it to be displayable. It's almost as if that circle has now come through, where we started understanding that partnerships are good. that inputs actually lead to outputs. They actually lead to outcomes. And I think that flywheel has now started, because in this room also, if you look at this room right now, there are non-profit leaders, there are CSR leaders, there are foundations. We've got capable states now available to execute and implement. I think the next 30 years are also going to be about direction. Like, what are those directions that we go heavy on, that we double down on, and what are the directions that we let go of because the world is changing? That was my takeaway from the optimism in the sector. And, it plays out in every single sector. Just the way Silicon Valley VC money was put in, started making money, more VC money came in. I think that same thing is going to happen also in the development space. Aditya?
I think just one point I wanted to add is, since you spoke about impact and outcome, one discomfort that I have since you mentioned about the CSR rules, while they call it as impact assessment, let's be honest, it's only an outcome assessment. And because they talk within 1 year you need to do, etc. So we would be fooling ourselves if we say that we are doing impact assessments when we are complying with CSR laws. It's only outcome assessment.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I think it's up to us to build on CSR rules. CSR rules are a direction, right? For us, impact doesn't stop at a project level impact, because we further layer it with a thematic impact, we layer it with a regional impact. So I think that's the value that you can draw out of the power of the rules, right?
Yeah, and I mean, just to even build up on what you guys are saying, I think I've not been in the space for as long as you guys have, but when I was working with Pratham, and I used to work in this department called Measurement, Monitoring and Evaluation, it's almost as if we were the ones who were seeding the word impact and evaluations. Now we've already said that word 10 times in the last 10 minutes. I think that's the change. Sorry.
No, actually, my point was very similar to what Prabhakar and you were sharing. I was just using a different word for it when I look back at the last 30 years. The word I would use is self-confidence. You said optimism, I'm just using the word self-confidence. I think, I'm relating to my own story. When I came back in 2001 and I was looking for something to do, I was roaming around, and there were several NGOs I met in Mumbai who were working on education. And one NGO is working with 85 children, another one with 112 construction workers, another one with 120 people. And they all thought they were doing as much as was possible. And the distinctiveness when you look at the stats, there are 300 children coming into Mumbai every day. So which means the bucket was leaking faster than you were plugging it. And so the confidence of doing something with scale, in those times, Madhav used to be considered like little nuts. Now he's considered the norm, right? So in terms of doing scale, I think that self-confidence that we can do scale, that scale is necessary, was something that I think Pratham brought into vocabulary and has brought that self-confidence into the sector. So I think that's one major achievement in the last 30 years. When I look forward for the next 30 years, sorry, I might sound a little cynical, but I think we've got stuck at a particular level. When I joined the sector, the question was, will my maid's daughter ever get the same chance as my daughter? That ethos, I think, is still not true. It is still some charity for someone else. The ethic of saying every child is the chances should not be based on the economic capability of the parent, but on the hard work and the talent of the child. I think it's an ethic in India which I'm hoping will change in the next 30 years. So then truly talented people are rising. And unless that ethic comes, I don't think we can build the larger democracy. Because the fundamental thing in a democracy is that if I work hard, my voice will be heard, and I will be able to contribute to the country. And I don't think that ethic is changing. In fact, I think we've got stuck at a particular level.
Got it. So that's useful. And just to take now that everyone has shared their opinions about what needs to be done, I think we got a lot of resources, capable people in this room who are going to be taking decisions that can fundamentally change India, the development space. And I think one conversation that we had was that there are some very common questions that CSRs, foundations, nonprofits deal with. So I would like to pose these questions to you folks, just to try to understand your perspective on it. I have done my research on the kind of work that you guys have done, so I know, where is it that you've gone deep. So I'm going to try to pull on those panelists who can add value to that subject. I think first dilemma that I wanted to talk about was when thinking about investments, there are a few long-term investments that you make, there are a few long-term bets that you make, and there are a few that can give you immediate impact. And I run a startup, and I keep my team very, very, very accountable on a quarterly basis on what are the numbers, how are they moving. With all of those pressures, how do you end up making decisions which are long-term? Is there a stress, a usual tension between, the regular monitoring and the regular accountability that comes in along with the fact that impact takes time? How do you guys think about this? And maybe we could start with Prabhakar, because I don't know whether you know this, but 40% of my time at Pratham was spent in ITC Sunerakal. So not only have you improved the lives of the children there, you've also improved the lives of Pratham alumni. Because in my interview for my business school, I spoke about ITC Sunerakal. So talking about this, I think you've been in those communities for a very long time. And talking from the Pratham perspective, when I was at Pratham, people love to work on the ITC project because we could try a lot of things there. A lot of experiments that we did there actually turned out to be programs that were used in other places as well. Why don't you start off with this inherent tension that exists between long-term decision-making and short-term decision-making?
Firstly, thanks for those kind words. This is again a classic case of impact. Means I don't think we ever thought of that today we talk of capability building, of implementation partners, etc. But we never sort of look at it from that lens, and thank you for bringing that perspective. I'll probably respond it at two levels. I think this whole dilemma of short-term, long-term, in my view, tends to happen when you purely look at it from a lens of allocation of funds. That's where that should I put it here, should I put it here. But if you were to look at allocation of funds is secondary. Whatever I do, I will go back to my anchor as to what is the purpose for which I am doing what. And I don't think most of us would have a purpose which is short term. Then it's not a purpose. So my takeaway is that whenever you have a dilemma, take shelter under purpose. Purpose guides you on what you should be doing. Purpose guides you what you should be doing rightly. That's one part of it. The second part of it is, I don't think it's a question of versus. And this is something I think in a lot of cases, and it's not only in this, everything becomes a dilemma when we say it's versus, either or. I think we have to learn to live with a paradox of and. Both can coexist. And when you start training your mind that I can live with this paradox of short and this thing, the dilemma does not exist actually. Let me give an example, I think. Frame with which you look at. If I am skilling a youth today and the person gets placed, is it short term or long term? One way to look at it is it's short term because the person starts earning, and therefore you can start putting a metrics. Okay, how many have you trained? How many have you placed? And then there could be tomorrow for some reason the placement comes down. You may have a knee-jerk reaction saying that the program has failed. But if you look at it from the lens of long term, yes, person is getting, but you have created agency in that youth for future. Then you will not be caught with the short-term metrics of placement. So that's an example to sort of say how to look at the lens. You require that metrics, but you don't make your decisions or respond just because that short-term meter is going up or down. You fall back to the anchor of what's the end goal per se.
And let me be a little more specific here, right? I think these are incentives, right? I mean, what happens is that results create incentives for people to behave in a certain way. They behave in a certain way, which leads to decision making. I think this is the thought that you have, but there must be an army of 1,000-odd people who you are working with. So I think what you are talking about is almost creating like a DNA, where everyone is thinking outcome backwards, is thinking much more long term. Is there something that you've done in your organization, with your team, with your leadership team, how they think that, just to change that DNA or even build that DNA?
I think DNA does not happen overnight. It also does not happen by one person's narrative. I think it's the collective leadership that gets involved in changing the narrative. One of our learnings has been is when you're looking at long term, the whole ecosystem also has to be aligned to think long term. If today we have been associated with Pratham for 20-25 years, yes, Pratham has also sort of had to cope with our idiosyncrasies. We are not the easiest people to work with, but there has been a clear sensing of value add, mutual value add. And to me, this, you'll have to look at the incentive that you asked in terms of shaping the DNA. The crux of it is if one can see value in it, then that narrative of incentives or long-term, etc., keeps getting reinforced. The second thing that what we have done is we have layered the incentives. The person who is on the ground probably would be more looking at short-term, etc. But as you move up the hierarchy, you start engaging at a different level. So today my metrics is not on what's the outcome we have reached, whether we have spent, etc. My metrics is not on the compliance of CSR rules, etc. Very briefly to explain, I get measured on 3 metrics. What is my pipeline for innovation? And this came up about 3-4 years back because it was felt that if you have to contextualize your responses, you have to start working on innovation. And generally, CSR has been risk averse because you're wanting very concrete results, etc. So that's one thing. The second metric on which I get evaluated is how is my partnership ecosystem growing and developing, including the partnerships with government. So that's the second metric that I get evaluated on. The third metric that we are now looking at is what role are we playing in shaping the narrative of the development sector ecosystem. Now, if that is my metric, it has come from the board. So that top alignment has happened. Now it's up to me as to how I keep sort of cascading it down. So we have clearly, differentiated our roles and responsibilities. I hardly go for my operations visits. I focus on this part and I have a separate team which drives this. Operations team would look at metrics, etc. And this is something that we are even paralleled with our partners also. So if I were to engage with Rukmani or tomorrow with the others, I will engage more on what else can be done, what are the possibilities, etc. I would not engage with them, hey, you had committed to this number, this has not happened, etc. So I think there's a need for this demarcation of roles and responsibilities so that you're riding both the horses together, actually.
And that's super helpful to kind of understand. Enakshee, I'll probably go to you next because I was reading about P&G and it's kind of had a journey in this. From the outside in, it seems as if you've tried to move from displayable short term to long term in the last like 20 years. It seems as if you're actively trying to kind of change that DNA internally. Could you walk us through what's happening in the organization? How are decisions being taken right now?
Absolutely. I would slightly tweak what you said, right? Have we evolved over the last 20 years? Absolutely. And we say that with pride. And I think it's generations of leaders at P&G who've done this role that I'm doing today that have shaped that thinking. But I think it was to the long-term versus short-term question, right? I think 20 years ago when we started P&G Shiksha, back then it was decided that our 100% community impact efforts will be focused on one cause, and that is education. So we committed to that on the long term. This was even before the CSR law was, this was before there was any mandate. But we said that P&G's motto is improving lives, right? So we said there is work that we do via our brands, but there is more that we can do with our presence in the country, and we should do that. It started with definitely more tangible outcomes, but it was also more what we sensed was the need on the ground. And we would like to believe that we've evolved with what is the most calling need from the ground. What is it that needs a lot of time, attention, care? As our resources have expanded, as we have been able to do more, get involved more, the long term on staying true to education has stayed, but the shorter or the short to mid term on what is it under education, because education can have so many different tangents, right? But under that, what is it that we choose to invest our, not just monies, but our time, our effort, our partnerships, building the ecosystem within the company as well, right? You also spoke of the internal dilemma, so to say. And I think what has really worked is just demonstrating the fact that we are not rigid. We will change with what is the need on the ground. And as long as we're able to create impact with that, it works. Having said that, I will also say that the long term cannot exist without the short term. And the short term impact is needed almost as proof of concept that if you were to scale this, if you were to do more of this in more markets, in more communities, with more children, with more parents, there is possibility of the same outcome to come. And therefore, to the point that you were also making, the two are very closely linked. But it's a role that all of us play to balance the two and ensure that we are able to create impact no matter what we choose to do, right? And today, I'm happy to say that we are focusing on learning outcomes. Is the more tangible infrastructure part of that? Yes, but it is a part and not the entirety of what we're doing.
True. Aditya, do you want to quickly give your 2 cents on how you think about this and how Piramal thinks about this? About the trade-off between short-term and long-term.
No, I agree with what Prabhakar is sort of saying. Even so, incentives at the different levels of the organization are for 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, or 7 years, which is also probably the duration you're going to spend in the organization. So if you don't have some value that you create over 7 years as a senior leader, then what's the point of you being around? You're not just there for the daily engagement. So I think it's a false dichotomy, and it's possible to do both. One trick I learned, or at least when you see the sector, is there are some people who in the short run, who have a long-term purpose and are doing short-run drama to keep people engaged because people need to see that some value has happened. And the others, unfortunately, who are doing long-run drama and short-run just measuring impact. And I think the main question you have to ask yourself deep down in your soul is, long-run, are you doing drama or do you have real purpose? And as long as you have long-run real purpose, everything else will sort itself out.
Good. We'll move on to the next question. From long-term versus short-term, I think another question that comes up, which is common, is depth versus breadth. There are a lot of geographies out there. I think everyone here has also taken very different kinds of strategies towards it. I know ITC goes much more deeper at a community level. I know HDFC has gone very broad. I just wanted to understand, when you take these decisions, and Nusrat, I wanted to kind of pick your brain on this, that when you take these decisions, what are the parameters that you think about when kind of balancing scale and depth? Because at the end of the day, there is a trade-off in both, and it's almost as if we need to hit that trade-off really, really, really well, because India is a scale country. Fortunately, unfortunately. How do you think about it at HDFC?
So I don't think, again, in this question, a trade-off is necessary. Yeah, it depends completely on what is it that you're hoping to achieve. And that will really decide whether you want to look at scale, you want to look at depth. I'll give you an interesting story about how our flagship program, which is our holistic rural development, moving away from education and livelihoods skilling, how did that really evolve? We've traditionally been working for, I think, almost about 3 to 4 years on very distinct verticals: education, skilling, rural development to some extent, and we've been working on financial literacy, etc. A boardroom conversation that said that, you're doing this in different geographies. What would happen and how would change happen if you did all of them within a confined geography? Can you try that? And that's how the entire concept of HRDP evolved, where we did all these 9 themes in a contained geography to see what is the change that we're looking at. So we still have our indicators on each of these 6 themes, which give you your short term. I'm also going back to that answer. And you're also looking at what sort of an impact you get when you're looking at a deep geography and scale. But again, today, if you tell me infrastructure, and in education, we enter at various levels, right? We work on infrastructure, we work on quality education, we work on teachers training. Now, it is difficult to select either or, right? Because there is a need, and the need is vast. So if I'm looking at infrastructure, then I'm doing scale. But if I'm looking at quality education, I need to look at depth. There I can't say that I'm going to look at scale and it's going to be a touch go. So it's very, very dependent on what you want to look at. You're right in saying that our programs are at scale. I'd just like to bear in mind that, you're looking at scale also in terms of the volumes of the budget. And the canvas that we are actually playing in. You're talking about 300 projects, you're talking about 1,000+ budget, which needs to be used across 6 areas. We need to go scale, right? We've reached underserved communities, we've reached border areas, aspirational areas, of course. In some cases, you definitely need to touch these areas and do some sort of an infrastructure work. I can't go depth there. I can't say that I'm going to have resources placed in border areas working on development. It's not possible. But the same thing is possible in an area where there is opportunity for me. So you've got to look at what is feasible, where there is opportunity for creating change, and accordingly decide whether you want to do depth or scale. So it's extremely important. The planning has to get right. You've got to do your baselining, you've got to do your needs assessment, and then decide how you will design your intervention.
Got it. Helpful. And Prabhakar, do you want to jump in here and just talk about quickly, because I know that you go very deep into these 13 communities. What is the thinking there?
I think the reason is on a simple belief that problems are interconnected. And if problems are interconnected, the solutions have to be interconnected. I may improve the learning levels of a child, but if the child goes back to a house where the whole ecosystem is impacted adversely because of any other reason, parents are not earning money, etc., all that will sort of negate the good work that you've been trying to do. So it's more driven by belief that you have to have a holistic approach if you are looking at long-term impact. So that's one part of it. I think the second part of it is, and that's something that we are now exploring. All these years, one has been operating on the mindset saying, when we are looking at breadth, everything I only need to do. I think now slowly the ecosystem is maturing where I can partner and collaborate with other organizations to ensure that all the enabling systems, processes, or interventions happen in that particular thing. So what you require is a convergence. Whether that convergence happens by ITC only or that convergence happens in partnership with others, then this whole thing of I may specialize in education, somebody else will specialize in agriculture, when they converge, you still meet the end objective of holistic development. So I think I see, while that holistic, the need is there, the approach could actually now evolve over a period of time, actually.
Got it.
So I have a slightly provocative point of view on this, and so I thought I'd share to see what people are thinking about. I think the audacity that Pratham brought 30 years ago to saying something can happen on scale, I think we've plateaued on that. We are comfortable with the scale of organizations like Pratham. I think we almost need that same level of audacity 10 times the size today in India. Otherwise, we are stuck. I'm going to argue that Pratham is subscale in terms of its size. Because look at the models that are available. The scale versus depth was applicable in a non-IT world. Today, when there is Google, you can get scale because, 1.5 billion people use Google every day, and you still get customization in your news. It is applicable in an old business model. Today, when you have Zepto, I have scale and I have depth of number of items that I get. When you have Amazon. So I think the models that non-profit execution needs to take need to really substantially change so that we get depth and scale. And I think we are short of those models at the moment, because when you get that, this dichotomy goes away. You can actually get more. So I keep on arguing, so we're working with children with special needs. Now, the more children you see in different languages with different special needs, actually you learn more to serve every child. Similarly, you see different languages. So there's an advantage and a cross-learning that's possible. And I come from I'm a chartered accountant. In chartered accounting, there are two types of organizations. There are either extremely small organizations where you serve the local community, or there are KPMG, KPMG, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, PwC. And what is the advantage? Why do you go to KPMG? Because the point is that it brings together so many areas of expertise. You couldn't imagine that 80,000 chartered accountants can suddenly get together and do it. But any area of law, any particular jurisdiction, any area of consulting, you can bring together to serve a problem. And I don't think NGOs have as yet reached that scale, which needs almost 10x of Pratham's scale. So you say, okay, there is child labor here, plus there is a health issue, and there's a skilling issue. Who are the 4 people? Can I bring in those team? And there's someone who understands rural Maharashtra, especially Nandurbar. Can I bring in the geographic skills, the technical skills, the integration skills to solve a problem? And I think that's only possible if you're much, 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 much larger.
I'm being asked to time out and stop the session because we are ending, but I'm going to double click on this one as the final question, Pallavi. If there was anybody in the audience today who was starting Pratham, another Pratham today, and was hiring their first 3 people, what are the 3 biggest capabilities that a non-profit today needs to have to be able to operate at a 10x scale as that of Pratham and be successful at it? I am considering depth to be table stakes.
So I'm going to answer this question in a reverse sort of way, and Usha reminded me of this. I think it is the community connect. The reason you can't do scale is because if you don't have community connect. I myself, when I joined Pratham, I remember I met Mr. Vagul in Chennai, then I met Ramesh from McKinsey, I met some 2-3 people from McKinsey, I met Madhav. That was not the point at which I chose to join Pratham. I went to M East Ward and I met one Balsakhi who took me around. I said, if an organization can create this type of person and 10,000 of them exist, then there is value to the country, right? So I think the crux is, are you plugged deeply into the community? And I think we've swung in this country too much towards techno-managerial solutions. And then you come with the techno-managerial and then you adapt it to the community. It has to be community upwards, and I think that is key. That is the first, I would say that's so you need that and you need the techno-managerial, right? The second part is you need the techno-managerial. But the balance between these two that you keep, that's the third group of people who keep this balance, because there's a reality of the world, there's a reality of this thing. So I think you need those 3 groups of people, and they come from different backgrounds, and if you can balance that, I think you can create an organization that's valuable to the country.
Thank you so much, all of you. I think it was a pleasure. I learned a lot because I also got to spend more time with you backstage. But I think the audience also must have learned a lot. So thank you so much, everyone. Hope you guys enjoyed it.
Thank you all panelists. I request all of you to stay back on the stage, and I would like to request Tukmani ma'am to come on the stage and thank our panelists. There are many more people who are in the auditorium now. Thank you, everyone. We would like to definitely mention all the board members from Pratham Education Foundation, trustees from Pratham Mumbai Education Initiative,